This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Three sisters killed in Libya airstrike blamed on Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces. 67 boys and men rescued from a Nigerian school after claims of torture and inhuman treatment. And U.S. President Donald Trump authorizes sanctions against Turkey over military offensive in Syria. This is CGTN. Welcome to Africa Live with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead this hour. In business news, Zimbabwe announces plans to raise mineral revenues to $12 billion a year by 2023. And it's all set for the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers as groups are drawn. Our leading story making the headlines in Africa this hour. And we begin in Libya, where an airstrike has killed 3 civilians in Tripoli. The victims were all sisters. Their mother is in critical condition and her 4th sister had to have emergency surgery to amputate a leg. The airstrike hit a house near a military intelligence camp in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. The country's internationally recognized government blamed the strike on forces of Khalifa Haftar. The commander, based in the east of the North African country, has been trying to seize Tripoli in the west in a ground and air campaign since April. The conflict in and around Tripoli has killed and wounded hundreds of civilians and displaced more than 100,000.
This was a displaced family. This house was donated to them, and now it's been hit by an airstrike. There were civilians, a girl aged 4 and another girl just 11 years old. They were innocent. This is my house, my car. My house has been damaged as well. None of us have any affiliation to any military, and we have nothing to do with this war. Someone pay attention to us and our situation. We're Libyan. We're killing each other. Why? I took them out of the rubble with my own 2 hands.
Let's head south to Mozambique now, where the country is voting for a new president. The contest is between President Filipe Nyusi of Frelimo and Osufo Mamadei of Renamo party. Frelimo has ruled the country for 44 years, and Filipe Nyusi is confident he will secure a second 5-year term. But the Renamo party is also banking on support from provincial strongholds to win the election. Under a recent peace deal signed by the 2 parties, provincial governors will be picked by the main party in each province and not the government in Maputo. Renamo therefore hopes to deliver a good number of provinces. Around 13 million registered voters are expected to take part. More than 4,000 observers had been deployed in the most watched election in the country's history. Tensions have been high in the country of 30 million people as campaigns were marred by violence and allegations of electoral fraud. Well, even as it holds elections today, Mozambique is still recovering from cyclones Kenneth and Idai that hit its coastal towns in March. The recovery efforts, together with the recent peace deal signed between the government and the opposition party Renamo, are some of the issues that will define the outcome of the election. Here's Laura Walubengo with more on that.
The 2 cyclones, Idai and Kenneth, landed in Mozambican coastal towns in short successions, leaving deaths, destruction and displacements in their wake. The South African nation is still recovering. But the signing of a peace deal between the government and opposition Renamo party in August was hailed as an historic moment. For Renamo, it was a moment that allowed it to present itself as a party focused on peace, as opposed to the violent campaigns that were associated with the former rebel movement. The party has its supporters.
I know that Renamo is a party that has come to serve the people, that wants what's good for the people. The party that stands for the end of corruption, good schools, improvement of education and provision of employment for young people who are currently helpless.
On its part, the ruling Frelimo party has never lost an election. The party also has a clean legacy of having leaders that never cling to power. Its fight for independence from Portugal makes it enjoy a solid support.
Frelimo is my father and my mother. It took me out of the slavery of the settler.
But away from the peace and effects of the cyclones, previous governance issues continue haunting the ruling party. The country is currently burdened by a $2 billion debt that was inherited from the previous government for projects that were never undertaken.
When Renamo wins these elections, it will firstly ensure that our people are well governed. For example, it will ensure that tax money from mineral resources, gas in particular, is used for the development of the Mozambican people and our country. Renamo's governance will never allow the Mozambican state, the Mozambican people, to pay back hidden debts, because these debts are owned, so it has to be up to the owners to pay.
Apart from that, the emergence of extremist groups in Cabo Delgado province is a worrying trend not just for Mozambique, but also the entire southern African region. Cabo Delgado is a province rich in liquid natural gas resources. Recently, President Filipe Nyusi signed a gas exploration contract with the French multilateral oil and gas company, Total, worth $25 billion. But violence has delayed the signing of yet another bigger contract with American ExxonMobil company. There have also been violent attacks by a group calling itself Renamo Military Junta, especially in the Rift Valley regions of Mozambique near the Gorongosa National Park. The group broke away from the Renamo party and has since declared a peace agreement signed between the government and opposition Renamo party as null and void. But President Nyusi says his party is the only one that can deliver what it promises based on its track record.
Our program is first and foremost based on trust, a trust that is based on the progressive steps that the country has made in the midst of so many difficulties experienced in the last 5 years.
As the Mozambicans go to the polls to decide their next leaders, the outcome will clearly ride on the past and present events. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Well, CGTN's Amy McConaughey is covering the election. She's joining me on the line from Maputo, Mozambique's capital city. Amy, this is the country's most watched election. It is coming against the background of a recent peace deal signed by both the Frelimo and Renamo parties. Update us on the voting process so far, and under what circumstances is that election taking place?
Yes, well, polls opened today at 7 a.m. and voters have been queuing up since morning to cast their ballots. And so far, there's been no reports of any major incidents. Election observers have said that there seems to be everything in order, procedures being followed. The main complaint has been that the queues were particularly long. But other than that, everything seems to be peaceful so far. President Filipe Nyusi was among the first to cast his ballot here in Maputo. And he told reporters that these elections would be one of the most observed in the history of the Mozambican elections. There's the most observers here in Mozambique and also perhaps even in Africa, he told us. Although this was met with a little bit of cynicism, particularly given the fact that there were a lot of complaints in the run-up to the elections that accreditation had only been given to regime-friendly observers. So not quite sure how that will turn out. Another issue has been reports in Cabo Delgado province in the north of Mozambique that some observers were denied entry into polling stations. And also in other districts of Cabo Delgado, some voting stations were closed altogether out of fear of insecurity given the Islamist insurgency occurring in that area. But here in Maputo, the voter turnout seems to be good. We spoke to a local journalist who said that there seems to be more voters here than there have been in previous elections, particularly among young people. There are a lot of young people out to vote this morning. But it's still early. We have around 6 more hours left of voting, and so we'll wait to see how things unfold for the rest of the day.
So, Amy, there have been no major incidents so far, but there were reports, though, that voters had been ordered to vacate polling centers as soon as they finished voting to avoid creating tension at the centers. Why are the voters, though, still around after voting, and are they respecting these orders by the electoral body in order to ensure a smooth process?
Yes, well, Abdul Karimo, the head of CNE, the Electoral Commission, said yesterday to ask voters to respect the law and to leave after they'd cast their ballots. But the motivation for voters hanging around after they've cast their vote stems from concerns among the opposition that the ballot boxes may be switched when they're not looking. So particularly in previous elections, voters have tended to hang around to try and observe the voting process as a way to make sure that none of the votes have been rigged. In Maputo, we haven't seen any of this occurring yet, but it's more common in opposition stronghold areas in the center of Mozambique and in the north, and images on social media coming through that show that this is actually occurring and voters are hanging around the polling stations after casting their votes, despite what's been asked by Abdul Karimo yesterday.
Amy McConaughey joining us there from Maputo in Mozambique, following all the developments in the Mozambican election there. Police in northern Nigeria have rescued nearly 70 men and boys from a second purported Islamic school. Many were shackled and subjected to inhuman and degrading treatment. Nigerian police in Katsina city shut down the school. This is the second crackdown of its kind in less than a month. Islamic schools known as al-Majiris are common across the mostly Muslim northern part of the country, and an estimated 10 million children attend them. But in recent weeks, reports have been emerging of alleged torture and sexual abuse. Well, let's cross over now to CGTN's Phil Ihasa. He's joining us live from Abuja in Nigeria. Phil, do explain to us what sort of school this is and how the captives got there in the first place.
Well, thank you. What we know so far is that this particular school in Katsina State, that's in Daura local government, has been in existence for at least 40 years. It was managed by a well-respected scholar, that's Malam. He's widely known as Malam Bello. He ran the school for over 40 years before handing it over to his son. So what we know, we're not so clear how these people got into that school. The police has launched an investigation to carry out exactly how they got into the school and how they've been mistreated all this while. The Amajiri is a system of education, Islamic education, that is practiced mostly in the northern part of the country. It's been in existence for many, many years, even before the pre-colonial era. So this is something that, of course, is enshrined in the Muslim community, and that's the way it's been for quite some time.
Well, Phil, just last month, hundreds were rescued by police from another such school in Kaduna State. How do such institutions get licensed, though, to operate, and why do authorities take long to realize what's going on inside those schools, given the fact that you've mentioned that this is a system that has been in place since pre-colonial times?
Well, you know, so because I mean, the Amajiri system is something that, I mean, you will not just find operating without the presence of well-respected Islamic scholars, mostly close to mosques, you know, the worship centers in the northern part of the country for Muslims. So you won't have police or security operatives just raid these places at will. They would have to have maybe some sort of tip-offs or reports from escapees, like in this case where the police commissioner Sanusi Baba reported that over 200 had escaped and insisted that the police go back there to discover or find out what exactly was going on there. So, however, the police commissioner has said that they are going to investigate properly this time these places, especially going through the 34 local government areas in Katsina State, which is the home of President Muhammadu Buhari, to you know, fish out some other similar places who, that's talking about the Amajiri schools that might have been carrying out these kind of operations, criminal activities against male children or males.
And as you've mentioned, Phil, this latest incident in Katsina is happening in the home region of Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari. How is the president reacting to that news?
Well, so far there's not been any official statement made by the president himself, but we know that just barely a month ago the president actually made a statement when the incidents in Kaduna occurred, where over 300 were discovered in a similar school there. And the president insisted that all traditional rulers put their hands on deck to fish out the perpetrators of these kind of heinous acts. He also insisted that the security operatives join hands to get some form of intelligence report on some of these schools that have changed their course. They've gone south and they're now carrying out these kind of operations, which is not legal. Also, the police commissioner has enjoined parents to desist from sending their children or their wards to these kind of places that are not approved or carrying out illegal activities like these that we've seen so far.
Philly has joining us there from Abuja in Nigeria. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. The United Nations warned staff of tough times as it runs out of cash. And 800 million people face acute hunger due to conflict, climate and economic discrimination.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
To Turkey's ongoing military operation in Syria, and the US president has signed an order authorizing sanctions against its NATO ally. Donald Trump said the United States would also suspend negotiations for a $100 billion trade deal and raise tariffs on steel imports from Turkey to 50%. Meanwhile, Vice President Mike Pence said he would soon visit the Middle East to mediate the situation. Well, it's now a week since Turkey launched its long-threatened attack in northeastern Syria. China's foreign ministry is urging Turkey to stop its military action in Syria.
Syria's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity must be respected and upheld. We urge Turkey to halt military action in Syria and come back to the right track. Turkish military operations could result in the escape of terrorists and the resurgence of the Islamic State. We urge Turkey to act responsibly and work with the international community to combat terrorism.
In Hong Kong, a court has moved to better protect the city's police following weeks of violent protests. The court has effectively banned anyone from blocking or damaging the living quarters of police officers. It comes after the police said the violence had escalated to a life-threatening level. The chief executive of the region said law enforcement agencies needed more support. Our reporter Xiao Yunfei has more.
Carol says the violent, life-threatening attack conducted by some protesters to the people holding different political stands or even journalists, including those cyberbullying, are the moves to silence different opinion. Here's how she briefed the chaos over the weekend.
I realized that some rioters were targeting certain shops and attacking people who work in the government, and government offices were attacked by the rioters. It is horrifying, and it seriously undermines the services provided by these lawmakers and poses a challenge to the Executive Council.
Lam called the public to show condemnation to radical movements and show strong support to law enforcement agencies, such as the police. Meanwhile, separate from the press conference, a Hong Kong court has granted an injunction to ban anyone from blocking or damaging areas that are used to house married police officers. But not only just the police, Lam says many office of pro-establishment allies members are destructed. Speaking of the district election, Lam says the every 4-year election are important steps for development for rule of law in Hong Kong. The SAR will host an open and honest election. She says the election committee will make sure the smooth of election in November 24th. Also, it looks like the policy address with Lam will deliver tomorrow is almost ready. She holds the document in hands with a press conference, saying there will be content about housing and land supply. The third policy address of the year seemed not that confidential. To calm Hong Kong people, Lam posted on Facebook saying that she will discuss a 10.5 billion Hong Kong dollars budget for resident complex renovation, as well as other plans to support education, retailers, and athletes.
A new round of cost-cutting measures went into effect on Monday at the United Nations headquarters in New York as the international body struggles to keep operating amid a severe cash flow crisis. Our UN correspondent Li Tan looks at what this means for the international agency.
At the United Nations daily press briefing,
yes, I've asked for a list of what you're saving by.
Awkward exchanges about service cuts to escalators belied the severity of the organization's money woes.
I checked with the comptroller this morning. He did mention there were some partial payments coming in, but we're still trying to run through some of the numbers. So hopefully we'll have an update tomorrow.
That controller warned Friday that the UN needs at least $200 million to fill an immediate shortfall, as payments to the UN's budget are still outstanding. The funding gap has forced the UN to freeze hirings, cut non-essential travel, and put in place a wide range of other cost-cutting measures.
Now we are at a point where I still need the $135 million to pay the salaries. I cannot even afford to pay the $40 million. So I have to save every penny that I have to save. And what choices do I have? Do I say now, don't pay the air charter bills that we have to have for Afghanistan? That's the kind of call we are making on a daily basis.
The UN says dozens of countries still owe annual dues amounting to $1.3 billion, forcing the world body into its deepest deficit in about a decade.
Only 131 countries out of 193 UN member nations have paid their dues. Among those who haven't paid are 7 nations that account for 97% of the money still owed: Argentina, Brazil, Israel, Iran, Mexico, Venezuela, and the United States, which is the only permanent member of the UN Security Council that has not paid up.
The U.S. owes $674 million for the year and has historically been the largest donor to the world body. But the Trump administration has been very critical about the U.S. paying the lion's share. In a reply to a report on the deficit, U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted that all member countries should pay up, not just the U.S.
We are looking at this in terms of all member states who are obliged to pay their contributions in full and on time. And we have been in touch with member states who owe significant amounts of money to the organization to see and to encourage them that we can have that cash forthcoming.
Latest measures include scaling back interpretation and documentation services, meetings and conferences, purchases of goods and services, heating and air conditioning, and utility bills. But it's unclear if these measures are enough to avert a default next month if nations don't pay up.
A severe financial crisis.
Li Tan, CGTN at the United Nations.
According to the World Food Programme, more than 800 million people globally are facing chronic hunger. About half the world's poor are said to be living in fragile or conflict-affected states. The organization noted that 60% of the hungry people in the world live in war zones. The WFP added that some 95 million people are facing acute food insecurity and 22 million people are displaced annually due to climate-related disasters. The international organization says it is working to bring food assistance to more than 80 million of those worst affected by hunger in more than 80 countries around the world.
We are talking about conflict, climate, and economic marginalization. The unfortunate part is that it's one more year of the same story. So people who were marginalized, who were destitute last year, are even more destitute this year. And they are completely, totally in many places, particularly in conflict places, they are reliant on food assistance.
Kais Saied is officially the new president of Tunisia after winning with 72.71% of votes during the runoff. His rival Nabil Karoui came second with 27.29%. The parliament speaker is currently acting as the interim president. He will convene the Parliament Bureau to hold a plenary session next Tuesday dedicated to the investiture of the new president.
The Electoral Commission said 55% of those registered to vote cast their ballots on Sunday.
The candidate Said has won the absolute majority of votes in the second round of the presidential elections. Therefore, the Independent High Authority for Elections declares him the winner of the 2019 presidential elections.
Nabil Karoui accepted the results and congratulated Said. Interim President Mohamed al-Nasser also congratulated the winner of the October 13th presidential runoff. The head of state commended the role played by all stakeholders in securing the smooth conduct and transparency of the legislative and presidential elections.
I thank the Elections Authority, government institutions, the police and army, specialized bodies, national organizations, civil society and international observers. Now, I urge political parties and freshly elected MPs to speed up the formation of a new cabinet.
Analysts say the freshly elected president may take oath of office before the House of People's Representatives on Tuesday, at the latest, if no challenges are filed with the election authority and the administrative court.
If no challenges were filed within 2 days of announcing the preliminary results, the Election Commission will announce and forward the final results of the second round to Parliament. The new president is an anti-establishment candidate who's elected by the Tunisian youth.
The EZ has granted 18,000 accreditation cards to civil society observers and 33,000 cards to representatives of the two candidates in the second round of the presidential election. Several local and international observation missions have welcomed the smooth running of the second round of the presidential election. They commended the effort of the election authority. Accordingly, the EZ has managed to bring the presidential election to a successful end in terms of organization and good administrative management. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's now take a look at your business news. Here's what's ahead. Zimbabwe announces plans to raise mineral revenues to $12 billion a year by 2023. And the new IMF head warns of a severe slowdown of the global economy.
CGTN Europe.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Zimbabwe has rolled out plans to increase diamond production to 11 million carats by 2023 from the previous 3.2 million carats in 2018. This follows the government's plan to raise mining output and bolster annual revenue to an estimated $12 billion. The country's mining sector is forecast as the main driver for reviving the economy riddled by triple-digit inflation and high unemployment. However, investors are concerned about the safety of their investments due to acute dollar shortages. Various companies, including Alrosa and Chinese-owned Anjin, are expected to drive up diamond production, mostly from the eastern Chiadzwa area. Tanzania's President John Magufuli has vowed to continue fighting corruption and the abuse of public funds as part of honoring founding President Julius Nyerere's legacy. He made the remarks in Lindi region where Nyerere Day celebrations took place. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
It's a day when Tanzania commemorates the passing of Julius Nyerere 20 years ago. He not only led the country in fighting for its independence, but was also instrumental in helping other Southern African states fight for their freedom. Across Africa, he gained respect as an anti-colonialist and in the power received praise for assuring that, unlike many of his neighbors, Tanzania remained stable and unified in decades following independence. He is also held in deep respect within Tanzania, where he is often referred to by the term Mwalimu, which means teacher, and is affectionately referred to as the father of the nation. President Magufuli says there's still much to learn from the late Julius Nyerere.
Let me take this opportunity to say that the fifth-term government that I lead will try its best to honor the father of our nation with no fear at all.
Julius Nyerere also worked hard to promote international partnerships, especially Tanzania-China relations. During his tenure as president, he oversaw projects such as the Tazara Railway, the Rafiki Friendship Textile Mill, and many more. His connection to China created the foundations for China to become Tanzania's #1 trading partner and foreign investor. 2 decades after Nyerere's death, President Magufuli says his government will continue to fight corruption in both politics and business.
We have decided to remember him by fighting all acts of corruption, theft and abuse of public office. These are all things the father of our nation hated and despised when he was alive.
The Tanzanian government says it's faithfully implementing many of Nyerere's philosophies, such as improving the welfare of its people through anti-corruption measures and the promotion of good governance. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
The new head of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, has painted a downbeat picture of the world economy in her first major address since her appointment. Georgieva, who is the former chief executive officer of the World Bank, said a more severe slowdown could require governments to coordinate fiscal stimulus measures. She said the fund will cut its growth forecast for both 2019 and 2020 and its next World Economic Outlook. The fund's latest outlook will be released at its annual meetings in Washington. In July, the fund lowered its projection to 3.2% this year and 3.5% next year, making it its fourth downgrade since last October. Russian President Vladimir Putin has wrapped up a visit to Saudi Arabia. During his visit to Riyadh, 20 agreements were signed at a ceremony in the royal palace. The contracts are estimated to be worth billions of dollars, covering the aerospace, health and agricultural industries. Putin also signed a key oil deal with Saudi Arabia to bolster cooperation among OPEC Plus countries. However, there seems to be no major changes from the previous deal, which has taken 1.2 million barrels of oil per day off the market since January. Aside from energy cooperation, Putin and Saudi officials also discussed military and technical cooperation. While the United States recently received the green light to impose tariffs on European imports worth $7.5 billion. It is the latest chapter in a 15-year battle between the United States and the EU over illegal subsidies for plane makers Airbus and rival Boeing. This followed a ruling by the World Trade Organization, which paved way for the United States to impose the trade sanctions ranging from aircraft to cheese, olives and jumpers from 18th of October. CGTN's Laia Helpern has the details.
In a meeting that lasted only 20 minutes, the WTO agreed that the US can impose sanctions on French exports in the ongoing subsidy dispute between the two nations. That's after the World Trade Organization found that France is illegally subsidizing the aircraft manufacturer Airbus. The tariffs are expected to be on agricultural goods such as cheese and wine, as well as civilian aircraft, and will affect other countries involved in Airbus too. European governments, along with Airbus, are calling for a negotiated settlement, since 40% of their raw materials come from US aerospace suppliers. The EU delegation to Geneva says it has serious concerns about these tariffs, which it believes to be short-sighted. With tariffs on agricultural goods as well as aircraft manufacturing, France is set to lose $2.4 billion, which is 0.1% of its growth. The new tariffs could also hurt the Americans, since the US supply chain supports 270,000 American jobs, according to a statement from Airbus. And the WTO is also considering a parallel case against the US for subsidizing Boeing, but France will have to wait until 2020 until it knows what level of retaliation it can enforce. And while French subsidies have been phased out over the past decade, the US government has not followed France's example. In the past, both parties have usually been able to agree a settlement, and retaliation rights are rarely granted. But this time, the US says it will penalize France to the fullest extent. The tariffs are expected to come into effect as early as Friday this week. Leah Heilpen, CGTN, Paris.
Nigeria's Customs Chief Hamid Ali says a ban on goods coming into the country across its land borders will last as long as it takes for neighbors to stem the flow of smuggled merchandise. Ali said all imports should now come through the country's ports. The entry points will be monitored more easily and generate much-needed revenue. President Muhammadu Buhari unexpectedly closed Nigeria's borders to goods trade in August. He said the closure will end rampant smuggling across the porous frontiers. The decision has had a devastating impact on Benin, which is Nigeria's neighbor to the west and a key exporter of agriculture to Africa's most populous country. It has also pushed up prices for staples such as rice at markets around Nigeria.
It is important to note that 95% of illicit drugs and weapons that are being used for acts of terrorism and kidnapping in Nigeria today come in through our porous borders. However, since this partial closure, the acts have become drastically reduced. Our conclusion is that the arms and ammunition these terrorists and criminal elements were using no longer gains access into the country.
Global ride-hailing firm Uber Technologies has launched a pilot test of a boat service in Nigeria's commercial city Lagos to attract commuters seeking to avoid the megacity's notoriously congested roads. Take a look.
Kehinde Ajayi, a Lagos-based architect, is putting on his life vest at a boat terminal in Nigeria's commercial capital. His destination is Ikorodu, a town located on the outskirts of Lagos. It takes about 3 hours to get to Ikorodu by road, but the boat crossing only takes about 30 minutes thanks to Uber. The global ride-hailing firm has launched a pilot test of a boat service in Lagos last week to attract commuters like Ajayi who are seeking to avoid the megacity's notoriously congested roads.
This is a great improvement. You know when to leave work, you know when to leave your home, you know when to get to this to the ferry jetty to get your boat, and really Uber has really set the pace for even every other competitors out there.
The waterway service, Uber Boat, is operated in partnership with local boat operator Texas Connection Ferries and the Lagos State Waterways Authority, otherwise known as LASWA. Passengers will be charged a flat fare of $1.39 per trip. Uber officials said there would be 4 trips a day, carrying up to 35 people on a boat during the 2-week pilot.
We at Uber, we wanted to see what can we do now? What can we do now to try and increase awareness of options that are available today for people to beat that traffic, right? You know, the trip from Ikorodu to Frelimo by boat is 30 minutes. That can take 2 hours, 2.5 hours plus by road, right? So Uber Boat is about us being aware and tuned in to what the specific challenges of transport are in Lagos and doing our part to see how we can work with Lagos State to try and address some of those.
The United Nations predicts that Nigeria's population will more than double to 400 million by 2050, which would make it the third most populous country in the world after China and India. With a combination of population growth, congestion, and poor infrastructure, commuting remains a challenge for many in the country.
Most people will be like, I'm not going to enter the water because, number one, your jackets are not even correct. If there's a mishap, most times all the mishaps have always ended up very fatally. And that's because most of them, if you actually investigate, the jackets were not even correct in the first place. So most people get drowned. So most people are scared of the waterways.
I think there are some people who may be a little bit hesitant. They haven't been on a boat before. Is this safe? But what we've learned is that there are multiple safe operators on the waterways. We have the Lagos State Waterways Authority, which is also doing its part to ensure that operators on the waterways are safe.
Uber's boat initiative follows a number of motorcycle ride-hailing firms that have targeted West Africa as an area for expansion in the last few months. Technology giant Google also launched a new feature in July that allows Nigerians to hear travel advice in a local voice on Google Maps. All these initiatives are an effort in easing traffic congestion in one of Africa's busiest cities. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
In Ghana, small and medium-scale businesses mainly run by women are learning how they can promote their businesses and their products using technology. They've been tapping into the knowledge of female professionals at the Women in Tech Week held in the capital, Accra. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai tells us more.
Jennifer Dankwa is at the Women in Technology Week to exhibit her food products. But more importantly, she says she's here to learn how she can further use technology to boost her business.
We use Facebook and then Instagram, and it's really helping us a lot because a lot of people follow us and then they order from our end. Then we give them good services as well.
The Women in Technology Week has brought together professionals in information technology to share knowledge on how startups can use technology to promote their business. Marketing analyst and IT professional Aseda Adaidese has already identified ways to help Jennifer's business, like using simple spreadsheets to keep better records.
She has to start collecting transactional data of her customers, either herself or she can get a company or someone that's good and that to help her with it. So gathering your customer data, you also know the kind of things people are buying at what particular time and in what particular season.
She says technology is crucial to help these small and medium-scale businesses grow.
Startups here say they are looking to adopt different forms of technology, including creating mobile phone applications to reach out to more customers. They believe by doing so, they can boost their profits.
The non-governmental organization Women in Technology Africa says it hopes to continue assisting women entrepreneurs to explore more technology in their business.
It's now become the basic stepping stone for a business to inculcate technology into it. So Women in Tech Week is focusing on exposing those technological processes that are very basic and very simple for a startup or any female that finds herself in the entrepreneurship space to take advantage of.
Jennifer Dankwa says she is happy she's now been taught other ways she can use technology to promote her business both online and offline. She hopes the lessons learned here will help her business grow. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. We take you to the streets of Conakry, Guinea for a plate of nutritious, affordable food.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Conakry, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You'll see them everywhere on the streets of Conakry, Guinea. Crowded food stalls serving hot dishes to passers-by. And CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa found out these ramshackle stalls serve an important function to their clientele.
Conakry is a city of contrasts, at once new and familiar. And in this jumble, nothing is more reassuring than its street cuisine. In several instances in cities across the world, people will often stop to enjoy street food as a measure only to get them to their next proper meal. But not so here in Conakry. Residents here enjoy their food. And no matter what the stew is, the main course is always rice. Let's have a look. The smells wafting from the kitchen are reminiscent of warm evenings with family members, of a mother's warm, reassuring touch at the end of a long day. It is exactly the message the head cook and owner of this roadside food stall wants to send to travelers, passers-by and regular clients dashing in for a quick bite. These roadside food kiosks are popular across Guinea's capital city.
Since childhood, I used to eat this food. It's a very delicious food, very good food.
They serve steaming plates of fish or meat or beans, and with every meal comes a plate of rice.
This is our culture, because as for me, if I don't eat rice for a day, they say, you can tell on me, it's a big problem. So this is the food we used to eat. This hotel food we don't used to eat, this is our culture food.
But there's another reason why the roadside stalls are popular. The food is affordable. In a country where more than half of the population lives below the poverty line, this is an important consideration. One can get a meal here for as little as 50 US cents.
Because the hotel you're going to buy more than 5,000, but the rice is 5,000. We're going to share it.
The rice cooked here is grown in the remote parts of Guinea. The food stalls provide employment in a country grappling with high unemployment rates. They also provide nutritious meals. And to those who have moved to the city hundreds of miles away from home, each plate is a taste of home. Wilkista Nyabwa, CGTN.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. All set for the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers as groups are drawn.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken,